All right. I think I wanted to do something a little different today, on the suggestion of my wife, where I record something a little bit different that I don't normally do. So I think this is going to be more of a recap / ramble episode. I think one could argue that a lot of my videos are exactly that, but anyway, so what I wanted to talk about was my experience in creating a wilderness dungeon using Into the Wyrd and Wild by Charles Ferguson-Avery, of which they have made a few things that I know of after this. One of which is the same sort of spiel and sort of thing as this, called Into the Cess and Citadel. This is more, as the theme implies, urban themed and dark city exploration, and it's really cool. I haven't really dived in too deeply into this one yet, just because cities have always been a point of hesitancy for me in creating adventures in, because of my lack of experience. But hopefully my current Shadow Dark a playthrough with Alma in the city of Thane, of which is in this notebook actually. Here's her character sheet, and then the page before that is the city of Thane with some random stuff. Hopefully this playthrough will get me more comfortable with urban-based sort of adventures in any setting. Eventually I would love to do a cyberpunk style or steampunk style, like nothing but a large metropolis type of thing, but that's for another thing, another video probably. But yeah, so he wrote Into the Wyrd and Wild and Into the Cess and Citadel, and what I wanted to do, I've used this in the past, even in previous videos as well. I can't remember exactly in which that I had used this book in, but back in the latter portion of the book is a chapter on generating the dungeon. I will preface this as this is not going to be a video on how to do this and following this. I have already done such. This is more of an overview on what I did and the story that unfolded as I did it, and the character that I sort of, loosely started to run through it as well. But yeah, so there's this whole chapter on how to generate a dungeon using some D6 dice, and I followed all this pretty much to the letter, and I used the tables in the back of the book for the various encounters and things like that. And some I chose a monster as well, to be like the main sort of enemy, or the main sort of beast of the forest, because Into the Wyrd and Wild is, as it is described, it is beyond the reach of roads, past the scope of mortals, there is a darkened place, a shadowed tree line where no one dares cross and whose boundaries go undisturbed. The woods do not care for you. Never forget that. So the whole idea is that this is a deep and dark wood, a deep and dark forest, jungle, that theme. And as someone who grew up around forests and the ilk, I really enjoy forest adventures. I have the Wondrous Expeditions book and this pocket guide from Loresmith, Really cool, I wouldn't say module, but resource book. Anyway, yeah, it's one of my favorite sort of biomes to explore are forests. And this caught my eye because it was very, very different at the time of while I was playing and making content for my table and just, rolling up spaces for my world, Akros. And this felt very dark and gritty. And I was doing more high fantasy and ethereal magic forests and stuff like that. And this delves much deeper into becoming lost is a big part of this whole thing, going mad. And all the enemies are very kind of, I wouldn't say all sinister, but they have that tone of strangeness and darkness and lurking behind the characters, and I absolutely love it. The factions all built in this book are interesting and twisted in some way. It sort of reminds me of a Shadowfell mixed with a Feywild, but on the material plane sort of forest, where various planes of existence might have crossed over into the material plane. For those that are familiar with how Dungeons and Dragons made their various planes popular, where there was different layers of existence in the same quote world. This feels like that sort of world popped up into the standard world, and if you wanted to play in that, this was a good way of doing that. So this is a fantastic resource. I highly recommend it. Charles Ferguson-Avery of oh Lord, Feral Indie Studios and Wet Ink Games. You can find PDFs of theirs on itch.io. I believe you can also find this on Drive-Thru RPG as well. But anyway, into the overview, I just wanted to highlight this. This was a very important book, throughout this whole thing, so I wanted to give it due credit. And so definitely going to be a rambling video from me today, I can tell. Okay, so in the book, he did recommend using hexes, because hexes is a pretty standard overland travel way of doing things. Lately, I have been trying to use the Pocket Lands system for my RPG that I'm developing, and they use geomorph cards, of which I have covered on the channel before. They're really interesting sort of multi-biome cards that you draw and you make the map as you explore, and they run on a 5x5 grid. It's very loose in terms of scale and stuff like that, but that's the idea, and I wanted to sort of keep with that. And plus, drawing hexagons on a notebook, on a grid-based dot notebook is hard. You would have to do something like this, and it just looks fine. But this is what you would have to do to draw a hexagon on a notebook like this, and I just didn't want to have to do that. I could have used a different notebook, which I do have Hexbooks as well, but I really like this notebook a lot. This is such a wonderful notebook. But yeah, so I wanted to do a 6x6 grid. To denote a mile is each of these, so it's a six square mile area. to sort of keep with the same theme as what Avery or Ferguson-Avery had recommended into the Wyrd and Wild. So let me go through the process generally speaking. So I basically made a 6x6 a grid. Oddly enough, I also, each of the mile hexes are divided into 6. So I could, in theory, use this map as a true point crawl, yes, but I also could use it as an area crawl, where if we start in, say, where the entrance is to the Garden of Broken Time is what I had named this, and almost all of the information here was taken directly from this book. Again, this source book has been very inspirational. So the entrance to the Garden of the Broken Time, I put in, effectively, I could sub-label all of the actual individual squares in this square mile hex into how fast that you can travel on a road, on like how many, how long it takes to travel from the entrance to 3A, and then going from 3A all the way to 1A. And I don't need to get that granular for this overview, but that's something that I could have done. So I randomly rolled an entrance to be in column 4 and row 6, so 6 and 4. So I just put the entrance there, and then I dropped a bunch of dice onto the grid, and that's where they came up, and the numbers showing on the D6, by the way. So I used a bunch of D6s. The number that showed up is, and where it is how big and where the location is. So a 6 is a large area, and a 1 is a small, usually like a stump or like a tree, something that is an individual thing that is interesting of that space. The lines between the 2 points are the trails that the PCs can follow, and the type of trail with hash marks or the dotted line is the difficulty, or if they're hidden. And this is all done by the process in the book. And then I went a step further, not just the size and the trails and the location, is I rolled up some things that I wanted the wilderness dungeon to have a flavor. And I wanted an ever-present threat that is more than just the threat of travel and exploration and the random encounters. I wanted something to be part of the whole forest, kind of like a myth or a large enemy of some sort. So I randomly rolled loud noises alert the primordial beast, and I was thinking primordial beast. Well, a beast, like a large creature that is stomping around the forest and the area causing mayhem, or is a slumbering sort of beast that stays still until enemies come by. I rolled up, or rather I took a look through this bestiary. Beasts of branch and bone is what he calls this chapter. And I gotta say, man, the art in this book is phenomenal. So I stumbled upon this thing, the Bramble Beast. It just fit perfectly. It had that primordial sort of feel to it. It's effectively like an infected creature is taken over by the forest. And all of these branches and the bramble and the seeds and the bush kind of grow out from the creature that it infects. And it reminded me of the demon boar and those creatures from Princess Mononoke, where there was a boar of the forest that got infected by this nasty, I can't remember exactly what they called it, but it was a demon that infected the boar through this weird slime, very viscous stuff, and it would come out of the eyes, it would come out of the skin, and the fur and the hide of the boar, and as the boar moved around, it was no longer the boar anymore. It had the shape and the sort of abilities of the creature, but it was being controlled by the demon. And that, I thought that was a cool thing to have in a deep dark forest like this, and the Bramble Beast just fit that perfectly. But outside of the threat, I also kind of needed some sort of a reason for people to want to come in here, as the theme and the sort of tone of this book implies for these forests and then for these wilderness dungeons. There are places that most people don't want to go into. So why would a group of adventurers want to go into this particular wilderness dungeon? Well, there's a myth, apparently, that there's a brazier that contains a fire that never goes out. So an ever-burning fire. And as anyone who does a lot of exploration will tell you, having a source of light is always important. So if you can have a place that is always lit and always will burn, having a safe place to come back to warm up, to camp at, and to restock on torches, and generally have a place to cook your food, that's kind of a very important thing, and can be a source of maybe magic then. So there's always, it's something that doesn't naturally occur. So that is a point of interest for mages. It's a point of interest for general explorers, and anyone who just wants to know why the fire never goes out, right? And so, of course, every dungeon needs, denizens, right? Outside of the random tables that you can roll to create adventures and encounters while your character or your PCs travel through a wilderness dungeon like this, you do need factions of some sort, or a theme of the types of people that they can run into. So I actually rolled again. This book has it is ripe with theme and ripe with just that it's oozing a particular feel. And so I rolled up that on page 136, Factions of the Wyrd and Wild. The Court of the Broken Branches just seemed so interesting to me. The whole idea is that there are just a bunch of animals that are just crazy. They're not normal animals. They are, they are beyond. And there is what canonically in the book, this a creature named the Lady of the Broken Branches, and she's been around since before civilization even began. She abhors that sort of way of life. She does not like that kind of thing, and wants the wilds to be as untamed as they ever are and still are. So the idea that the Broken Court, of which that there's a cool table to make up a random lord of the Broken Court. So I did that because if anyone knows me, I love my tables. She looks badass, looks amazing. There's nothing innately wrong with using the Lady of the Broken Branches as is in the book. The way that she's described is phenomenal. But to put my own spin on this whole court of the Broken Branches, I wanted to make my own. So I created the Duchess Borean of the Elder Sap, an elk-shaped woman that kind of glows a brilliant, blinding white light in the presence of her court, and she despises mortal civilization and requires the wilds to remain as such. So the theme here is that you don't want to fuck with don't fuck with nature. Keep it as is. Like, the whole idea is that this is a national park. You bring in stuff and you take everything that you did and you leave it better than you found it. But most importantly, don't mess with the stuff that you don't need to, or the broken court will come after you. And that goes in line with the primordial beast, the Bramble Beast, being disturbed by loud noises, presumably made by things that aren't natural. So the clanking of swords, the clanking of armor, and the setting up of camps, and unnaturally made fire, especially fire in a forest, that's bad. So the whole idea is that you got this adventure site, this wilderness dungeon, if you will, where adventuring through is it's dangerous at the baseline, and it becomes extremely hostile the minute that you start to invade and engage with it. This particular area is not great for button pusher style of gameplay. You probably would die pretty quickly. So that was the theme. I also wanted to have, because of the nature of traversal in a thick canopy forest area, that type of thing, I wanted it to be a night themed thing. So I wanted to create a moon, and you can do that in the moon stats are somewhere in the book. I can't remember. Yeah. So there's the moon phases and names and random moon descriptions and random moon phases. So we have a half moon Kut, Kuut, where the size and the distance varies depending on the phase of the moon. And at a half moon, we would roll a d6 and basically 50-50 chance that an encounter will occur, which I kind of like how the phases of the moon increase or decrease the chances of encounters, which is kind of cool. And this also encourages time tracking, something that I feel is a lost art in any game. Time tracking can be very loosey-goosey / not important, or if it is in the game, not utilized well. I myself fall victim to that, of course. It is just something that if a game has survival mechanics, you sort of need to worry about the passage of time. So that's why we have that. Pardon me. So let's go through the various areas and trails of the map. I think I have eight. Yes, I have 8 locations with various types of trails. I have a couple of hidden trails that go into areas that would not be discovered unless they're specifically looked for. So all tiny font for y'all watching, but the idea is that each trail is a particular level of difficulty, from a footpath all the way to extremely dangerous. when I rolled randomly, I got footpath and difficult and hidden. And those are the only 3 types. A footpath is generally clear, and the only dangers really are the environment around you and not the path itself. Difficult paths are things that, in terms of something that most people will understand, it's basically difficult terrain. So things might take up more time or use more resources to get through. And I wanted some flavor for each section. So again, using the random tables in the book, me and my red random tables, I love them. I rolled up various trail types and the things that are along the trail. Something that's not really seen in a lot of other supplements and game aids is what you see as you travel between point A and point B. You can think of these travels as the corridors between the areas. But again, travel is important and takes time. For example, going from 1A to 4 here in 3C and 4, you got a difficult trail that is littered with shattered glass and mirrors all along it. So one could imagine that there's rocky bits and there's gnarled roots everywhere, but in between all the other areas is this strewn with lots of shattered glass, so making it harder to find a place to rest without needing to take care of the glass. It is sharp, it is dangerous. It could do damage if you slip and fall on the roots or the rocks. And so it takes a little bit longer to traverse between that. And it is, 2 hexes away, or 2 squares away. So in terms of, it is about 2 miles away from 1A to 4. So you would estimate how long that would take in travel and in a forest in the difficult terrain. So you can adjust how long things take depending on the type of travel and the type of terrain that they're actually walking on. Then with the areas themselves, I rolled up a couple of things: a point of interest, and then what the area sort of feels like or looks like. And to utilize the same examples, 1A has there's like umbral oaks carved with angry runes everywhere. So it's obviously feels like it's a place that has seen use before by previous people, but that is left to me to decide, or whomever goes through this dungeon to decide what those angry runes are. And those umbral oaks carved, like why were those oaks carved and not the other trees? But here I rolled up randomly a still lit bonfire. So as the PCs or your character comes into this area with the umbral oaks, with the angry runes, you see a still lit bonfire. And I took that as an obvious nod, an obvious example of what I wanted the interest was. A brazier that contains a fire that never goes out. And I actually chose that this was that brazier. But why would you want to go deeper? Well, I'm thinking that maybe there was in fact, this is on a coastline, if you will, of a large lake. And I'm thinking that the lake takes up these 9 squares here, because I roll on this hidden trail. So you don't know that it's a trail, but there is a robed figure that's next to a dock that has a raft. And if the PCs or your character interact with this person, they will probably educate you a little bit on the lore of this of this region, but they will take you, if you pay in secrets, to this secret area, body-filled bog, that has trees with roots all over that snake and writhe and move. And I don't know what I would do with this little area, but it's a hidden trail to a specific spot in this dungeon. So that would be interesting. And there are lots of areas here that are very evocative. This book really gives us that. It's a very evocative book. I'm lacking on words and descriptions right now, but anyone that has this book and has used it, trust us and say that this book is oozing with a flavor and theme. So when I created all of these areas, and as I was filling in the region and the items or the things in the area to draw the PC's attention, I was like, well, I really want to run through this. I want to engage with this. I didn't want to utilize like a rule set or any other rubric per se, except for the things into the Wyrd and Wild. And I wanted to keep on brand with like why somebody would actually go through here. So I rolled up a character using what did I use? I used a resource and I can't remember. Oh, right. Of course. I used Knave. So I rolled up a woodsman named Willow Witherly, a apprentice woodsman who is tasked to find some sticky fungus, which incidentally is all the way at the last area of the map, and you would have to traverse a lot, or you could go in undiscovered parts of the forest. But again, staying on the trails is generally safer than going off the beaten path. But of course, you can go off the beaten path. So he had some hide armor, a bow, a dagger, a week's worth of rations, and some camp stuff. So I kind of gave him the kind of generic tools of general survival and adventuring, right? I gave him a task to do, and his patron, the master woodsman Joe, who tasked him to find this, and a name. And those are the only stats that I gave him. So effectively what I did is I rolled a d6 from the entrance and kept track of the time, of which I used a separate time tracker on an index card, not on this page. So I effectively just did for time per day, and I would kind of roll a d6 to see if anything happened along the way, and because it was a half moon, 50% chance, so a 4, 5, or 6, something would happen. Then I would roll on the encounter tables, right back here, Wyrd and Wild encounters, and sometimes I would also use the locations if his character went off the beaten path and into a new area, which he did not. My character died before he could go somewhere, so every time that he would travel and how long it would take, I would just X out a time box and keep track of days, day 1, day 2, and etc. So I would do that, and to keep track of like his health, I just kind of did like a random sort of because this book is scaled for OSR and that style of books, or that style of turns and rounds and fighting. it's fairly system agnostic, but it leans heavily into armor class and hit dice and points and how it moves and the damages and stuff like that. So it feels very OSR style in its design philosophy for the monsters. But you could use it for any system, of course. But and so my system is, you know, so I was a hunter, I was a woodsman, which is usually an apprentice woodsman. I was averaging, I think I used I used Shadow Dark, I believe, as the standard sort of thing for the I think I used the ranger class, but I used the fighter and I rolled up a level 3 fighter, that kind of thing, and I used that as his basic stats, and I think he had like 12 hit points, something like that, and every time that he would get into a battle and lose, it was more of a D6 roll, and he would roll his hunting bow or his dagger, and depending on his advantage, I would roll 2d6 and I'd take the better, and I would on the fly change his odds of success based on the scenario. And a 1 was always a failure. A 6 you would keep rolling, and it was an exploding system, a la Four Against Darkness. And there's a couple of other systems that do that, and that's how I would go through the adventure in the battles and stuff like that. And he came up against a few things, and he got to the bonfire. He was able to rest for a full day, but he was unable to find any food. So by the time he got to, there was this abbey up here that was now decayed. And it was just this open treeless field with weeds everywhere, so you can see the open sky. And it was dark outside at the time, and there was this like strange creature. I think I randomly rolled, I forget what it was, but it was like this weird eagle creature that came by out of nowhere and critically hit. And he had just rested, and he healed up a couple of points, but not enough. He was down to like 2 hit points, and he tried to run, but because he was running, I randomly rolled which way that he would go, and there are 2 paths. One was hidden, one was more likely, and so I basically rolled a d8. I rolled the d20, and basically on a low enough number, he would find the way that he was trying to go. But I rolled a natural 20, so the environment was able to kind of engage with him. So he ran off, going northwest here, off into the wilderness with like 2 hit points. He had to run away, so he didn't have his camp stuff, and he only had a day's worth of rations left. So he died somewhere over here, which was wild. Which was Willow Witherly died basically of the dying of the elements. He got lost, and using the lost things here, he is currently lost because I made this where is it? There was a nice little cheat sheet in the back. Where is it? There was a cheat sheet. Here we go. Becoming Lost. Yeah, so this was a Dangerous Woods. So I rolled 1d10 times 6. I rolled a 10. So he was lost for 60 hours, had no food, and was at 2 hit points. So instead of keeping on playing him being lost out here, I just allowed his character to die, because the story was basically going to die at him. Now, so he's left up in the air in terms of the narrative. Yeah, so that was Into the Wyrd and Wild, and my character Willow Witherly, an apprentice woodsman, as he traveled through the Garden of Broken Time. He never once made enough noise to have the beast come out, thankfully. Like, all of his sort of stealthy things and his combats were very primal, and he didn't use his dagger, and he didn't come up against any enemies that made a lot of, like, clangy noises. So it was very, like using his bow and him you're jumping around the environment and doing so in a good way. Being a woodsman, I gave him sort of advantage on that sort of thing. And thankfully, because he didn't really damage too much of the environment until he got lost, he didn't really trigger the wrath of the Duchess Borean of the Elder Sap, the Broken Court, Duchess. So he really just sort of died from exposure, or is lost by default in this large, weird and wild forest. So, yeah, I highly recommend anyone picking up any one of their source books and trying to keep to just that. We have so many resources in this hobby. We are in a quite an interesting age to be in for the hobby. And we have lots of resources at our fingertips, both upcoming, current, and even older ones that have been around for a while are nice and classic. And this, I believe, is a classic book, along with Into the Sis and Citadel. Fantastic stuff. Charlie Ferguson-Avery and Alex Coggin. These guys created Into the Sis in a Citadel, and their company, Feral Indie Studio, they have another book / supplement / role-playing game that I saw via Questing Beast on Ben's channel. That's the author of Knave 2nd Edition and Maze Rats. His channel covered one of their other books, and it looks smaller, and that looked really interesting. I can't remember off the top of my head, and all of my information is on my phone, so I can't access it right now. But yeah, so that was Into the Wyrd and Wild, and I highly recommend everyone going and checking out all of their stuff. I absolutely loved using this. It was a lot of fun to roll up random, really dark stuff, and you could really have an interesting, just environmental story, then a very brutal sort of character adventure in it. And then if you have something that a character or a group of player characters with a little more developed backstory and character growth, having them being thrust into an environment that sort of makes them, forces them to focus on not them, but the world around them, and see what happens. That's always a fascinating story. So, but yeah, I think that's all I want to cover today before I start rambling on even longer than I had intended, which is exactly what already happened. So, there's that. But thanks for checking this out, and until next time, folks, I'll see you on the flip side. Peace.